All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to a special Thrive O'Clock, Thrive and EDU community on a Tuesday night. Normally, we're live on Mondays and Fridays, but we have a special guest tonight, and it's a special night to have you join in with us here at a later time, too. So hopefully, we have more interaction because we have a fantastic guest. So, first of all, I am Rachelle and do a lot of things in education. I'm not going to take up any of our time because I want to save it for our guest and then our game. But you can connect with me here or on Twitter. And I have an amazing co host who I will let her introduce herself because why not? Go ahead, Lainie.
I can think of lots of reasons why not. I've been on here before a few times. People are probably sick of me, but I'm Lainie Rowell. I'm an educator, author, consultant, and just always honored to be here with you, Rachelle. And I'm very excited for our guest. Although I want it on the record, I agreed to co-host before I knew who the guest was.
I know you did. And I am so thankful for that because I sent you the message. I'm like, hey, are you available? And you're like, yeah. And then I wrote, don't you want to know who the guest is? And you were like, no. But then when I told you who the guest was, I know you were extra excited. So
I mean, I was a little more on the fence, to be honest, but I love you. I love you, guest.
I love you, guest. This is like Facebook user. We love you, Facebook user, like the mystery guest right now.
We haven't revealed the person's name yet, have we?
No, we haven't. And I was careful because normally I put the ticker on that says, hey, follow these 3 people before we introduce the guest. So I've learned to not do that because I don't want to have the spoilers. So anybody that's joining in, we would love to know where you're joining from. Please engage with us, ask questions, play our game, whatever it is. And we're just thankful that you are here. And I'm going to bring our guest up. Look who it is, Lainie.
I love this person. I'm so happy he's here.
I think I was referred to as guest, by the way, just guest. And I actually heard that was not the story. So for those of you that have been watching the whole time, that's not remotely what happened. Rachelle was like, hey, Tom is going to be on. And Lainie's like, no chance at all. I'm out. That's what I heard. But hey, Lainie, thanks for being here too. Appreciate it.
I know. And I'm so thankful that you're here because Tom, this is your second time on the show. So that must mean something that like after the first time that you came back.
No, I screwed it up the first time. And this is my like retry, replay. You can do it. Let's do it again. That's what I heard.
You did not.
Redemption, Tom.
Redemption. Oh my gosh. No way at all. And I'm thrilled that I've gotten to see you and Lainie and other people that we've had on in person at conferences. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But for anybody who does not yet know you or might know you and doesn't know a lot about you, would you mind sharing a little bit about what you do?
Awesome. Well, hey, everybody, and thanks for being here tonight. Such an honor to connect with everybody. So I'm Tom Murray. My day job, I'm the Director of Innovation for Future Ready Schools. Been doing that for about 7 years. It's hard to believe it's been 7 years. Prior to that, I was a district level leader. Prior to that, I was an elementary principal. Prior to that, I was a secondary principal. Prior to that, I was a middle school teacher, an elementary teacher. I obviously couldn't keep a job. So now I work out of Washington, D.C. Totally makes sense, right? So I get to run Future Ready, bipartisan nonprofit. Some days I get to work with the Senate, Congress, that kind of stuff. But that's actually not the stuff that I love. I get to be with amazing educators all around the country, principals, superintendents, sometimes lead teachers, working on things like vision, communication, but also culture, leadership, all that kind of stuff. And that's my day job. But I also get to write and do books and speak and do that kind of stuff. So no matter where I go, Rachelle, I get to connect with amazing educators who are working hard for kids. And that's the biggest reward.
I'm like speechless when I listen to you. And I know when I listen to you, I know a lot of the work that you've done because like I'm familiar with your work and I've read your books. I know about your experiences, but to hear you say about all of the roles and then it's just like, that's what I do during the day. Like, wait a minute, what? Like that is enough for many days, all day. I know that you just don't just work until 3 or 4 o'clock. You work like right now, you just finished something up and you're joining us. So I very much appreciate that. And I know that you're on the road a lot too. And that's not the easiest thing to do. But I will say for myself, and I'm sure Lainie and many people that are watching who've had the chance to hear you speak or read your books, like they've learned so much from you. And that's the biggest piece I take away is like sharing what you're doing to help other people and inspire them. So thank you for all the work that you are doing because it's saving people like me from having to do a lot of the other work too. I think maybe. I know that's terrible.
Thank you so much. Honored to be here.
Yeah.
And if
Lainie?
I could just embarrass Tom really quickly, because I do tease him a lot, and he's actually just one of the best people I've ever known, super generous, and he does a lot behind the scenes for people that people don't even know about. So I just really appreciate him, and so
Thanks, Lynn.
happy to be here with him in this space.
And I thought when you said you were going to like, did you say embarrass him a little bit?
Embarrass
I
him?
thought you were going to tell like some super secret story or something and be
Ooh,
like, oh my
that's a good
gosh,
idea
shocker,
too.
like breaking noise. Oh, good idea.
We work on
No, I'm not going to give you any ideas for that. So anyway, so to talk, like sometimes we say, what's on your mind? What's going on? What have you been doing? And I know one thing for me and for you as well is like, we've been able to get back in person at
that.
conferences, which has been amazing. One, because like it's been too long. And two, you get to meet people that you've been friends with that you've never met in person and you see that they actually exist. But and I don't know how many conference sessions you actually get to attend because your schedule is so busy, but you probably maybe potentially find such a benefit in just those conversations that you get to have like at different places. I know we had a chance to talk and catch up last week and just, I mean, lots of laughs, but lots of inspiration and new ideas. So I would like to lead it off with like the importance of connections. And that's a big topic, but what's going on in your life? What can you share with educators who might be feeling like overwhelmed or so many things that are going on right now?
Yeah, well, first of all, great question. It was great seeing you as well last week in Texas. And when I think about it, first of all, it actually comes when I think about the importance of connections. Number one, it's really how we're wired. Like human beings are wired to need and to crave being with other people. And so I think we have to look at it from kind of a brain science end of it's really how we're wired. And I think when we look at the impacts of the pandemic as educators, it's easy to jump right to the academic side, all those phrases and words that are out there on things kids missed. But so much of the human connection is what people really craved and missed. And so I think being back in person, and yes, educators are taking the proper precautions. People were wearing masks and respecting people's choices and what they were doing. But just the ability, the excitement when people were back together, seeing each other, literally seeing people they hadn't seen since before the pandemic in a few years. This work is so ridiculously hard. And so to take the work together, to be together, the human side, to say, hey, like, I miss you. I love you. It's been awesome to see you in person is very, very different than virtually. And I know everybody in the world that at least I'm connected to made an effort to do things like a Zoom happy hour on Friday or things like this where we can connect virtually. And there's so much value here, especially when we can't always travel. But there's something special about being person to person, side by side, next to each other. And so it's been awesome to be back in person. I've been doing a lot with leadership teams, with convocations and that thing since last July. And kudos to every educator that's done everything they can to keep people safe, to stay healthy themselves the best that they can, and to continue to focus on the people side of stuff.
I love that. Okay, so this is totally unscripted, and I'm going to ask you a question that we didn't talk about before, and I don't even think we talked about that one, but I'm just curious when you had those opportunities to be together. And FOMO, I was at a virtual conference when you guys were in person last week. It's fine. It was a great virtual. There was a hybrid. I was at the virtual part of it. But anyways, when you were getting together, Tom, like what were some of the themes or the concepts that were like really on people's minds that people wanted to talk about once they finally got together? And I know you've been in some in-person stuff, but that was an event that I don't think happened last year.
Yeah, not in person. So things that were virtual in nature. And so first I'll give a shout out to the two that Rachelle and I are both referring to, and that's TCEA and FETC, and two incredible events. I've had the honor to be at both of them for at least 6 years, FETC probably closer to 10. Wow. And I share that. If I think about different themes, first I would say they're both known as kind of ed tech conferences. Some events that I do are very leadership oriented, superintendents, principals, and you'll certainly find those folks at these two conferences as well. But ed tech is kind of the underlying theme of so much of this, right? They've certainly branched off to do a lot of leadership stuff. One of the things that's interesting when we think about and reflect on the pandemic, like for the past at least 10 years or so, like the amount of ed tech that we've purchased has continued to escalate. And then when the pandemic hit, it was like all out. Why? Kids needed devices, kids needed connectivity. Places all of a sudden that had handfuls of laptops were going one-to-one. There was obviously an equity gap. There were so many pieces there. And so one of the things that when we're going to these conferences, making some of these connections, that's really front and center on my mind right now is what does the effective use of educational technology really look like? It's something that I wrote about in Learning Transform, something I wrote about in Personal and Authentic, because if you just watch social media and you attended a handful of sessions, it's really, really easy to walk away thinking that just because something's digital, it makes it any good, or to walk away, you know. And here's what's really interesting. If I go to a conference like that, and again, they're fabulous conferences. If I were to name a title of a session, 1,000 apps in 60 minutes, it would be people are crawling to get in, like it's jam-packed, completely shut. Everybody's trying to take notes. And then if I were to name the session next to it, and I'm facilitating both of them, shifting pedagogy, there'd be 6 people in the room. And what's fascinating to me is like, we've got to be really careful. And I'm a huge fan of ed tech. We've got to be really, really careful that the shiny object or the tool doesn't become the reason, the focus, the why, the outcome, the end result. It's a pathway, it's an avenue, but we've got to be really careful we don't start focusing on the wrong stuff. So hear me out when I say that. Definitely a really big fan of ed tech, but when it's used well. And so one of the things that I'll go back to that I've done a lot of research on, my team at Future Ready Schools, we did an entire project for a year and a half with Dr. Linda Darling-Hammond and her team at when she was at Stanford, really looking at it. What is it that actually works with ed tech? And number one is this notion of interactive learning. You know, we could contrast active use versus passive use, and how much interaction is the kid doing? If we look at passive use, it's not inherently bad. We will do it. You know, we watch a video, we read a static web page. Like, it's not inherently bad, but it's passive in nature. And kids can learn things when they're passive in nature, but at the same time, if it's not active, what we're going to get is really low levels. And so if we're not careful, we can invest a lot of time in low level stuff. Number two, it's the use of technology to explore, to design, to create. When I think about like Webb's depth of knowledge, Bloom's taxonomy, whatever framework you're using, it's really those higher ends. So how do we make sure we're using it to explore, design, create? And then the third piece, it's not referring to blended learning, but what's known from research is like, what's the right blend for teachers in technology or kids in technology, meaning what great teachers have always known. What's right for one kid may be different than another. And so one of the things, Rachelle, that's really front and center on my mind is, how do we make sure people understand it's the right tool for the right time for the right job? And there's times where you don't need it and it's okay to put it away. So some of my fear coming out of conferences is I'm going back to my building saying, here's the best 3 apps that I learned, and I have to figure out a way to use it. I mean, that is backwards. And we've got to be really careful of that, because bottom line, we could be 100% digital, leveraging 100% digital content 100% of the time, and simultaneously 100% low level learning. And it gets celebrated on social media every day. Huge fan of ed tech, but we have to focus on what really works, and we have to make sure it's deeper in nature.
And not to cut you off, but
sorry
like
for my little rant there, by the way.
No, it was
that.
good. It was good because it ties in to like almost 2 years ago now, whenever schools closed, and you know, some schools didn't have systems in place like a Teams or Schoology or Canvas or any of those. And you had teachers who may have just started to use technology, if they were using technology at all. It might have just been one thing like Blackboard, and they were posting assignments or using a game-based learning tool. And then you had, and for some reasons it was like, I don't need the technology, or because of the cost or the access to it was the issue. But then we didn't have a choice because like we had to facilitate learning, and then everything was free. We got all these tools, everything to choose from, like use them all. There were so many, everybody was overwhelmed. And it's nice to have so many choices. But at the end of the day, like you say, like what's the underlying purpose? And one of the sessions that I do, and I laugh when I say this because like the sessions that I do are so opposite. I got like the AI, the AR, VR, and then I got like the SEL. And then I have this one that goes right down the middle, and it's called Go Rogue, Creating Chaos to Re-Energize Your Classroom. And that session, one day I thought about like, what did I change in my classroom over the years that improved the learning experiences of students? And ultimately it had SEL, of which I'm not an expert. It's just things I've learned along the way. But when I used to do that session, I led in with a lot of the tools. And the most recent times that I've done a session like that, or if not that exact session, I switched it up and I led in with the methods, because the whole thing is like, you know, we want to create these opportunities for students. So maybe it's project-based learning, maybe it's Genius Hour, maybe it's, you know, scavenger hunts, or just random things that are not relying on the technology. Because I did one of those 3 on 3 and 3, kind of like the Ignites at ISTE about 6 years ago. And it was on interactive lessons and tools like Edpuzzle and PlayPause, and there was one called Zaption. And my students were creating with it. And I thought they were the greatest things ever, because it was giving them that chance to be the creators instead of consumers. And so I go and I'm like, all 4 of these tools. And the very next day, like one of them's gone. There wasn't even a, hey, we're ending in 6 months. You can migrate all of your stuff. It was just gone. And I was so reliant on that. And so now when I do that session, I focus on those methods that it doesn't matter what the tool is. Like, what's the purpose for this method? Okay, now find the tool that's out there to facilitate that and to make it better. And I didn't always think of that way. I always thought like the kids, and I cite your book, Learning Transforms, right over there, with you. And I think it was 11,700 hours that students spend sitting in their chairs. And I say this every time I give that presentation, and I think, gosh, like that's such a long time. You know, we have to get them up and moving and be more active and giving them choices. And I used to think student engagement meant that they were like playing the game of Kahoot or something, which it can be, but providing more opportunities, using the different tools and finding what works best. And now I want to rant. I've changed a lot over those years, but like reading that in your book and reading some other books and learning about these different methods and getting away from the tools, because there are so many out there and they're not going to work the same for your students as they will for my students, and or year to year. So what's the method? Okay, how do you facilitate that method or amplify the learning that method is going to provide for the students?
So Rachelle,
I'm done.
A quick story here of this is where it really hit me front and center. And it actually, believe it or not, educators would be like, no, it actually came from a supervision conversation when I was the teacher, brilliance from my principal. I share this story in Personal and Authentic. So 20 years ago in my classroom, 20 years ago, I was one-to-one. Palm pilots.
Yes.
Not,
that's right.
I did one of those too.
Right? So like you guys, it's the beaming, the beginning of the mobility. So here's the really quick version. I was getting observed. My principal created an amazing culture. Bill Gritzula, incredible leader. It was a great principal. We had the relationship. So I want to preface everything by saying that. So I get the, like, hey, I'm coming next week. Want to do an observation. Wanted to come see spelling. Still remember to this day. Don't ask why. It just was what it was. So I'm thinking to myself, hey, we're piloting. I was one of 2 or 3 teachers in the district that were piloting Palm pilots. By the way, I was told that they were going to completely be the game changer for education, but that's a side note. So anyway, I'm planning my lesson and I'm thinking to myself, all right, maximum engagement. I want to use technology the whole time, really leading with the tech stuff. So Bill comes in, does this lesson. And I will tell you, here's the thing, follow me for a moment. My lesson plan was like followed to the minute. Literally, kids were using technology every moment of the entire lesson. Now, if you remember, kids like Palm pilots, you're beaming things back and forth. So like the beginning of mobility. Kids had their own individual spelling list. They would practice. They would beam it. Their partner would check it back and forth. Every question I answered, like hands are going up. I'm thinking to myself, I'm crushing it. I'm glad my principal's here to watch what brilliant lesson looks like. I'm going to just drop the mic when I'm done. Yeah. Crushed it. He goes. I'm like, all right, kids, get out the recess. That was awesome. Wanted to say like, Bill, did you notice how to teach a lesson? Because that was really, really good, right? So I'm just teasing when I say that, but I was really confident. So the next day I walk down, post-observation, really quick part of the story. Post-observation, I go down. I'm thinking my chest probably out a little bit, being like, I can't wait to hear how good he thought it was yesterday, because every kid was engaged. I used technology the whole time. Like every kid followed every direction. Like, got it. Now, again, I had the relationship. I had the culture. He saw enough that he could push me on this. So I sat down and he's like, asked, you've all heard 1,000 times. He's like, so Tom, how do you think the lesson went? I'm like, I gotta be honest, Bill, I thought it went great. Every kid was engaged the whole time. Technology was used the whole time. Went through every time I asked a question, kids were doing it. It's all right. He goes, Tom, tell me about your learning objectives. And I was like, well, we wanted to use the Palm pilots to be able to. And he stopped me. And I'm like, tell me about your learning objectives. And I'm like, dude, you just cut me off. Like I was about to. We wanted to use the Palm pilots and he stopped me again. He's like, Tom, every time I talk about, you go to talk about learning, you're talking about devices to start. Because Tom, let me push you on this. Again, we had the relationship. Could you have done the exact same thing, side by side, pencil and paper, in 5 or 6 minutes that the technology took 25 minutes to do?
Yeah.
So he said, Tom, I really believe that you created the lesson because the technology could do something, not because it was the best way to learn something. Mm-hmm. And so I share that. And again, I didn't leave there sobbing. He really pushed me and trusted me. It's where my mindset shifted, that I was creating things just because technology could do something. But if I didn't use it, it would have been much more efficient and effective. And I think we can be really guilty of that if we're not careful. That's when it slapped me upside the head personally.
Yeah. I mean, Tom, I'll say I had a similar experience with the Palm pilot program. And that's just fun to say. I think we've all had maybe similar experiences. You could throw in interactive whiteboards instead of Palm pilots, where we lose track of the objective, the learning outcome. We end up slowing learning down, which is like the worst, right? We're not amplifying, we're not accelerating, we're actually slowing down. So that's a really, really scary thing. But I think, I mean, I've tried to, I'm still know I could be better, but I really try and focus on what we're trying to do and then the tools later. So we're getting, we're getting.
Yeah, and to be clear, there's definitely times for efficiency that it makes sense. Not everything, if I'm a principal listening, like not every time I walk into a classroom, it's going to be deeper in notion. Like that's not possible. But what happens is we get ourselves all excited about the latest shiny object or tool, and that becomes the desired outcome. And we really quickly can have it backwards. How do we make sure that it's the right tool at the right time for the right job?
Yeah. I think sometimes we can add a filter to it. So like my filter is this going to promote more inquiry-based learning and to get us to XYZ objective? And
Like
so,
that.
Sorry, I just heard noise in the background, then I realized what it was. But
was it a cat?
Surprisingly, yeah, it was. But they're locked out. But I never had a Palm Pilot. I saw them, but I also don't have an iPhone, so I guess like they go. I think I saw my Commodore 64 somewhere around here. But you know, there are a couple, like just talking about tools for a minute. You know, there are some that somebody asked me like, well, what's the best for this? And what's the best for that? And I'm like, I can't answer that question because I might think it's the best and your students might try and they might be like, this is the worst thing ever, or the learning curve on is too much, or it doesn't have, you know, templates or something that teachers can start with. And that's the ones that I find to be the most valuable are the ones where you can go in and you can start. And it's like Nearpod. I always give shout outs to Nearpod because all of the lessons, the content is relevant. They bring in current events and all you got to do is create an account. It's like, I made this, like you didn't make it, like it's already there. And then you don't really lose a ton of time in trying it because, you know, it's already made. Then if you see what the impact is on students, then you can kind of like check it out. But I do have to say that in the past, probably 3 or 4 weeks, I've had my students I'm the only Spanish teacher. So we do use a lot of technology because I like to see, especially with learning languages, I got away from all the papers and packets and then of course, virtual and hybrid, but I'm really curious to know how it benefits them. And for me, learning languages in high school, we had the books and the papers. We didn't have the tech, definitely didn't have the translators, but I like to ask them questions. In the past couple of weeks, their favorites have been using Genially to make these animated brochures and travel items and books. And then a new one, Spaces, which is every day they come in now, they're like, are we doing Spaces today? It used to be the games. Are we doing games? Are we watching a video? Now they like using Spaces because they can post a video. Like today they went around wreaking havoc in the school on this like scavenger hunt and posting pictures and writing in Spanish or recording themselves with a video or audio. And it was like the greatest thing ever. And it didn't take much time to start. And it might've been like, oh, like when I started to use it, I used it for Genius Hour actually, but then I never thought about using it for Spanish. And now they're like giving me ideas. And I think that's so valuable too. Is like, maybe you try something as an educator and then the students are like, why aren't we just doing this on paper? When it's like just a simple substitution. You're like, yeah, good point. But when you can build upon that, or there's all these other, you know, integrations or ways that we can use it, or even to collaborate and connect around the world, it's so much better. And I do have a link here I'm going to drop into the comments. We do have a comment coming in. We have a hi, hello back to you. So anyway, that's my little mini rant there.
So Rachelle, I'll share a quick resource here for the listeners. So I've done a bunch of sessions with probably about 1,000 educators that have weighed in here total. So if you go to, it's bit.ly, so bit.ly/tools for engagement, and the T, the F, and the E are capitalized because bit.lys are case sensitive. So bit.ly/tools for engagement, you will get to a list of about 300 plus tools that have been curated and narrowed down by teachers saying, this is a go-to tool for me. Now, I don't know the privacy laws in every one of your separate states. Yep. I don't know. I don't look at every single one of those regards to that. But if you are here, you are welcome to use that as a starting point. But I'd also ask, don't get overwhelmed. It's easy to look at it and be like, oh my gosh, it's broken down by content area, by subject. And you can see, go in there. Those are ones that teachers have said, these are my go-to tools and resources. So let it just be a resource bank for you if you're looking for something.
And I've checked that out, and that is amazing. Like that is definitely a great resource for everybody who's watching now to check out. And if you're not watching and you listen to us later, I'll make sure you have that link as well. So before we dive in for the last couple of minutes for our fun game, and for anybody watching, make sure you join in our game as well, because it makes it more fun for us. So anything else you wanted to add, Tom or Lainie?
Well, I still don't know what game we're going to play, but we'll figure that out.
I got it. There's no worries.
So
There's no worries.
So I don't know why I feel compelled to say this, but as we were talking about earlier, the influx of technology and having served in a district leadership position prior to being a full-time consultant, I will say, I know that you decision makers don't need one more thing to worry about, but I do hope you've got a refresh plan somewhere in the back of your mind, because when you dump a ton of technology at once and they all need to be cycled out at the same time, that is not an ideal situation. So I really hope you start to think about how you can make that happen in a very reasonable way. So I don't know why I just like had to do a little disclaimer there. Like, gets me so nervous.
So Lainie, I'll take that and amplify it.
Please do.
I am petrified of the fiscal cliff that's going to happen in our country in 3 years. I'll go on record and say I'm absolutely fearful of people losing their jobs. I'm absolutely fearful of massive budget cuts. I don't say that to stir fear. I say that because our districts for the next 3 years are getting ARP funds, millions of dollars, of course, depending on the size of the district, that they're using to plug a lot of holes, to buy a lot of stuff, to buy a lot of technology, and then it's gone. And if we are not strategic about it, there's lots of people, lots of places that are hiring people that after 3 years, that money's not there. And so we need to make sure that we're doing this in a sustainable way. Now, I'm not throwing my district leaders under the bus there, because I will tell you that they are working really hard to make sure that it's done in sustainable ways. But as we do buy technology that will be dead in 4 years or so, where's the money coming from to replace it? And so that's really what Lainie is getting at. And if we're not careful, we're going to have a fiscal cliff in 3 years if we're not really strategic about it.
Yeah. And I think it's something we've been struggling with the whole pandemic, is how do we get through this emergency state and also have the long view? So I think that's just something we have to keep coming back to, and being, as you said, Tom, as strategic as possible. And so much love for all of my educators. You're all decision makers, but there's some real tough decisions that have to be made. And so
absolutely.
Thank you.
So that I gave a resource there for the bit.ly for especially for teachers that are looking for different tools, again, that have been curated by lots of teachers. But I also want to put a resource that you see on the screen right now for especially for my leaders, for principals, superintendents, those folks that are listening. If you go to thomasdmurray.com/authentic.edu, it does go along with personal and authentic, but you do not need the book to access the resources. Lovely ladies, look how nice that was. But if you take a look there, there's over 150 videos, articles, discussion guides, starters, questions, those things you can use with your team around things like equity and technology use, culture, those types of things there as well. I don't need any credit for it. You're welcome to use it with your staff. I curate it just to support.
Awesome.
Okay, please give him credit for it. Like, just put the name somewhere. Just
yeah.
Thank you. But Tom's very, very generous. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. Tom. Okay, so do we have time for 5 rapid fire questions? Yeah. Too bad if you say no, because I already put it on the screen.
Let's go. No idea what it's about, but let's do it.
I don't know either. Okay, so this one's funny. So first question, if you had to change your first name, what would you change it to?
Okay, Tom, you take a minute. Let me just tell you that Lainie.
I'm going to go to Lainie for that one. Wow, that's a
Lainie.
The rest of
the
them are easier.
Question that you've asked so far.
All
right,
Lainie is hard to say. It's hard to spell, and I hated it growing up. And then when I got older and needed to buy a domain name, I was pretty excited about Lainie. That's where it paid off. My middle name is Jae, and I went by Jay at certain times, I think in middle school, just because I had to like try and mix it up a little. What about you, Tom?
So here's what I'll say, and I'm doing it for being meaningful, not because I like the name.
Okay.
I'd use Vincent because it's my father's name, and I have incredible respect for my dad, all he's been through in life, and the resilience and the perseverance that he has. Not that I'm a fan of the name, but it would be an honor to be named after him. But Thomas is his middle name, so I kind of am.
Oh my God. See, how do you well, Rachelle, I want to ask you, but that's a tough one to follow. He just did a tribute, but
I know. Well, mine would be Dana. And I know you're probably like, where did that come from? That's because anytime I order takeout or anything, my name is always just Dana. I don't know why. It's just been that. So I would just be Dana. Or I could just follow and make it Renee officially, right?
totally thought you were going to say Renee because everyone sees your
No.
handle and confuses it and
Hey,
calls you Renee.
Renee. I just saw you walking through the expo hall, Renee. I'm like, it's okay. So anyway, I know that was like a tough first question, but the rest of them are easy. Okay, so question number 2. What is your favorite season?
Summer, by far. Put me on a boat, put me on the water. I'm not coming back.
Okay, this is
All
where
right.
it's gonna show that I'm a Southern California girl because I would like to be winter somewhere else where I can wear boots and scarves and really let my wardrobe shine. That's what I would like.
Careful what you wish for.
I know.
Right.
I drove my daughter to school today. It was 7 degrees. So be
Oh
happy
my
you're in
gosh.
Southern California.
Okay, that's a bit much.
All right. I'm going to go between those because I do like winter, but I'm going to pick fall because I do like the boots and the sweaters and all those things. So we kind of fit well together. Nobody picks spring. I don't know why. Okay. Question 3. What is your favorite board game?
Monopoly, because I love whooping my 8-year-old son who talks a big game.
Okay,
That's a good one.
it's not a board game, but I have to tell you, sorry, I'm off camera.
She just disappears. She just slides away.
I just slide away. Oh gosh, sorry. This is hilarious. It's called Pit. It's an old school like 70s card game with a bell, and it's like you're trying to corner the market for different like corn or wheat or something like. It's so fun and it gets really lively when we play. So, Rachelle.
All right. I do like Monopoly, but there's a game that I like, Scattergories, where you roll the dice and you get the letter and you have to come up with words. And anytime I've played with anybody, like it's just the most ridiculous words that people come up with. And it's always, it's random and it's fun. Okay. Go-to karaoke song. What is your go-to karaoke song? Question number 4.
Living on a Prayer, Bon Jovi. Easy.
I think I would have known that one.
Mm-hmm.
Lainie?
I'll change. Last week I said September by Earth, Wind, and Fire. I'll do Girls Just Want to Have Fun to mix it up.
Nice. And I think I'll stick with my same one I did last week. Remember what I said? Eminem. Songs by Eminem.
Did you enjoy the halftime show?
I did. When Eminem came on, I was like, all right. Turned it up a little bit. Okay, last question.
By the way, that was a great halftime show. How did they get all of those people there? That was amazing.
I don't know, but there's a lot of people on that field. It's amazing how quickly they do that. Okay, last question. What, that was a bad one. Sorry. What is your favorite food that you eat, but also that you can cook?
Wow.
You see, I had all my answers lined up, but that I can also cook. Oh,
yeah. Okay, or just your favorite food.
All right, there we go. That's easier because I was gonna say I'm narrowed down to like PB&J, mac and cheese. Like I'm really limited there. I'm going chicken enchiladas, Mexican restaurant, and I guess if I've got to cook it, Uber Eats is my solution.
Okay,
there you go. There you go. Lainie?
Indian food, my favorite.
I am a fan of HelloFresh for the past year. That's been my new thing because I look like I'm just this masterful chef. But I think the best thing that I make is probably an upside down apple pie because people fight over it.
I'll take it.
Yeah, and I rarely get any of it, but yeah, at this point I'm starving right now, so it's going to be some tilapia and some rice tonight for anybody that cares. That's what I'm making. Very easy.
Very healthy.
It is, but I'm going to have ice cream later, so don't let me kid you right now with that. So, all right. Well, thank you for everybody who's joined in. Tom, I got a message to you from Brian. Hey, Brian, it was great to see you last week at TCEA. Yep. And so excited, so thankful that you joined us, and lots of words of wisdom, lots of resources that you shared. Definitely fun to chat, especially since we got to see each other in person finally after so long. Appreciate your time. And any last words for anybody?
I'll just simply say to every educator listening, thanks for your work each and every day. Your work matters. Don't lose sight of that, but also continue to take care of you in this process.
I got nothing better than that. Lainie?
Well, you're both very near and dear to my heart. Since Tom's the guest, I just do want to shout out to him. He is someone that I can always count on. He's a true friend, and I am very blessed to know him. So thank you, Tom.
Thanks.
I couldn't agree with that more. Thankful for him as well. I'm texting him like, what do I do? How do I start writing a book? But that's another time. We'll go back to that. So
10
anyway,
books
thanks.
ago.
I know. Thanks everybody who joined in. We will see you again on Friday. Have a great rest of your Tuesday and make time for you. And don't forget to grab a copy of this book and Learning Transformed, which is over the counter that I might knock everything down if I grab it. Oh, thank you. There you go. And we'll catch you next time. Thanks, everybody.